welcome to our next episode of Translating the Keys of the Bible. We're translating roughly 4,500 occurrences of the Hebrew word key, which I'm highlighting on the left-hand side. And notice I also have the Legacy Standard Bible, the Septuagint, and the Dead Sea Scrolls up in case we want to do any textual criticism. And in this case, there's no need to. So let's just dive in. So beginning in verse 19, if you are willing, and that's a plural you, so if y'all are willing, and you obey the good of the land, you will eat. And if you refuse, or y'all refuse, and y'all rebel, the sword, well, you'll be eaten by the sword. Key, the mouth of Yahweh has spoken. So we want to figure out how to translate the word key here. So rather than going with hit or miss with all the different ways that key has been proposed, we're going to think through the three options that I think key should actually be translated as. If, when, and that. So if you refuse and rebel, the sword will eat you when the mouth of Yahweh has spoken. Well, that's kind of weird. I can't imagine anyone expressing themselves that way. Or if the mouth of Yahweh has spoken. So if Yahweh has really said this, then these things will happen. But if he hasn't, well, I, Isaiah, have just been lying to you this entire time. So, take a gamble and good luck. You see, do it and find out if I'm lying. That doesn't fit with the Isaiah's writing style for him to end this prophecy, well, this if-then promise of what will happen with this, no, if he said this, then it'll happen. That just doesn't fit. So our only option is that. And just so that you remember, I don't mean that as in the demonstrative, so that dog, talking about a specific dog. Neither do I mean that as in the relative pronoun. So I saw the dog that was fluffy. I mean the complementizer. So the complementizer turns a sentence into the object or subject of a verb. That the dog is fluffy is obvious. So without the word that, all I have is the dog is fluffy is obvious. And that should sound wrong to you. You need the word that for the dog is fluffy to be the subject of the sentence is obvious. So complementizers are very frequently used in this way, but they're also used in additional ways. So in Danish, German, Swedish, Icelandic, and a few other languages, these are used to give I'll just summarize it as a contextual comment. So you say that, and then you comment on something that is obvious from what was being said before. So someone holds up a picture of themselves having a good time and says, that I had a good time. And it's obvious that they had a good time from the picture. He just bluntly stating what's obvious from the picture. So if Isaiah is doing that here, he gives these if-then statements, and then he comments on this obvious fact that the mouth of Yahweh has spoken it. And we're supposed to think, okay, so if I do this, I will get blessed. If I do that, I will be cursed. And it's obvious that the mouth of God has spoken. So that implies that these things are definitely going to be true. So if I rebel, I'll suffer. If I'm obedient, then I'll be rewarded. These are definitely true because, God's mouth has spoken. Now we're coming to this causal relationship, but not directly. We're not translating key as because. We're not multiplying the meanings of key. The complementizers in Danish, German, Icelandic, and Swedish are not the conjunction because. So we That's not what's happening in those languages, so we don't need to say that this is a causal conjunction. So contextual comment is one possibility. The other possibility is that this is an inferential statement. So in English, we use inferential statements. We often prefer having them in tandem. So let me give you an example. So, Frank, I have to leave now. So that's my statement. And now I'm going to make a tandem inferential. I'm going to deny the inference that I think Frank might draw. It is not that I don't like spending time with you, but it is that I will be fired if I am late for work again. So this is an inferential statement. Well, two of them. The first half of it tells Frank not to conclude that I don't want to spend time with him. I just told Frank I have to leave. He might think to himself, that I'm leaving because I don't like him. I don't want to spend time with him. So after saying I'm going to leave, I then say, hey, it's not that I don't want to spend time with you. And then I'm telling him the correct inference he should draw. But it is that I will be fired if I'm late for work again. So in English, we say it's not that. But we could also just say not that. So you don't need to have that. It is in all the cases. I mean, we could also remove it here. So not that I don't like to spend, not that I don't like spending time with you, but I will be fired if I am late for work again. So you can just have the word that. So not that, but that. So if we just remove everything that came before, we have that I will be fired if I'm late for work again. Now, because we prefer tandem constructions and we generally prefer it is with our inferential constructions, I can't just say, do it this way. I can't just do this. That sounds very weird to us. Frank, I have to leave now. That I will be fired if I'm late for work again. That's not acceptable in English. But it is acceptable in other languages. For example, Middle Egyptian and also, yeah, some cases of Spanish. So without going into all the technical evidence for why we believe Biblical Hebrew would allow this when English doesn't, uh, you'll have to read my dissertation if you want to read the argument for why that's the case. We can understand what's going on here as an inferential construction. So what inference does Isaiah want his audience to draw from the things that came before? What is the correct inference? So Isaiah speaks confidently about all these things, and he wants them to draw the inference that God himself has spoken it, and he's just repeating what God has said. So we are to infer that he is speaking confidently about what the consequences of our actions will be in specific because he has gotten this information from God. Once again, we're at a causal understanding without translating key as a causal conjunction because. Now, you can make a good argument that since English doesn't really prefer to use constructions like this, while other languages do, perhaps we're still better off translating it as for. And you know what? I am very sympathetic towards that. But as long as we don't actually believe that the word key means the word because or for. And that's significant because understanding what key is actually doing helps us not force causal relationships on text where there are none. If key is always translated because, then we are always forcing a causal relationship upon every text we find it in, even when the author had no causal relationship in mind. In this text, we come to infer a causal relationship but not because we're translating it as because. Yeah, and so that's Isaiah chapter 1, verse 20. This time was a bit more technical because we don't really use these constructions so much in English, at least not in the way that biblical Hebrew does. But I hope that as we go through these verses, you'll see uh, the exegetical usefulness of not multiplying the meanings of key, but sticking with a small and but flexible group of words that can be used in many different ways, but it still remains one word category.